same line. They tell us how to get it out from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. The 21st century brings us new and exciting opportunities as well as daunting challenges. Never before have we seen changes like the globalization of the economy and the large changes to which our social fabric currently is occurring with such speed. Happiness and prosperity in the 21st century requires a renewed commitment to the individual, and that's why the Steve Beaman Group was created. Hello, Steve.
Well, good morning, Clay. It's wonderful to be on Blog Talk Radio with you.
Well, we're on Blog Talk, we're on TalkShoe, we're on Blog TV, and we'll be on, somebody may be hearing this on YouTube, too.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm pleased to be with you and all of the listeners that you bring to the radio today.
Well, we would have more audience if we had more advertisers that weren't being pressured not to be on the Free American Hour.
I can certainly see that. We see all kinds of inordinate pressure being put on by people in power trying to stop a certain voice from being heard.
And you're talking about globalization here. I mean, this whole idea of globalization is being foisted on us in the media, in the schools. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but I guess that would be in the current political climate of the move for one world government. I guess that'd make me a nationalist, a patriot, what are the other terms? Isolationist. Do you want an isolationist?
Well, let me just share some thoughts on that. As you indicated in your opening, the Steve Beaman Group was founded to provide empowerment tools to individuals, and I think that's the operative word. When our nation was founded, the fathers of this country recognized that big is dangerous, whether it's big business, big government, big anything, because they tend to want power, and power brings more power, and as was said before, ultimate power corrupts ultimately. It's all about the individual, and to the extent that government is getting bigger and bigger and eventually goes to a global government, the individual loses all of their power and gives it inadvertently to that bigger organization. And it is a trend that we are seeing today. It's an unstoppable trend unless the people of the world really do individually rise up and speak their voice on a rational basis and bring back that power to themselves and bring it more local from the national and international organizations.
People don't do that because I think they're afraid of being killed. They've tried to kill me at least 3 times in the last 7 years.
Well, I think you got a couple of things. First of all, if you look in the United States today, the government has set it up so that half of the people have no skin in the game. Half the people pay no taxes. They get benefits from this big brother state. And so when you've got that, those 50% of the people like what they see. They're happy with it. It's the 50% who pay for it right now that are sensitive to it. So right off the mark, you got half the people taken out of the equation. We then go into a school system that does not teach people independence, freedom, liberty, and responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Dewey. Thank you, Mr. Dewey, you know.
Right. It teaches collectivism, and collectivism does not work unless it is a single global collectivism, and then it only works for the people in power. It doesn't work for the individuals living their day-to-day lives out who now have become de facto slaves to the state.
I've said I would be all in favor of communism if it was what it implied it was, but it's not.
It flies against human nature. Basic human nature has a self-centered kind of motivation to it, where individuals are motivated to build a better life for themselves. Yes, we care for our families, and yes, we have nice big hearts that care for our neighbors, but when you extract that care and force me to care for my neighbor, I no longer want to do it, and that's what causes those socialist, capitalist, or communist systems to collapse in their own weight.
Now, like I said, I've been reporting on this for a long time, Steve, and I'm excited to have you on because you're basically echoing and affirming what I've been telling people over the show for 20 years, that there is an answer out there, and the basis of all civilization is the self-sufficient family farm, where families have worked on a farm in conjunction with neighbors for barn raising, that type of thing. And I'd like to see us get back to that. I came up with a plan called Liberty Villages, and figured if you're living in low-cost housing, teepees, yurts, cabins, whatever, instead of a 2,000 square foot box that you're paying for 3 times, and you're growing your own food, and you can generate your own energy direct from God, from the sun, the wind, everything that's provided for us. You don't really need the government for nothing, and you don't need the banksters for nothing.
Well, it's very interesting you say that. That sounds almost like a playbook right out of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged.
One of my favorite books. Read it 40 years ago.
And I recommend as a reading list for anyone listening to this program, because we are seeing that play out in today's society. And what it basically the thesis of it is that at some point, the individuals who are capable of self-survival dial out of society and say, you take it. And that's what we're seeing now increasingly. When you start to get regulation and taxation like we have in the United States, people who can produce goods and services are increasingly saying, you know what, I don't want to play that game. I'm done.
As I told the IRS agent, you guys are crooks. I ain't signing no more. I ain't playing no more. I ain't going to play that game. I ain't going to pay that. That's a false debt. I don't know that. I'm not doing that no more. And that's what I did. I've been, what have I, let's see, I'm a loner, I'm an extremist, I'm a racist, I'm an anti-Semite. Why? Because I don't want to play your games, because I don't follow orders, because I won't walk off the cliff with the other lemmings. I won't do that.
Well, we go back to the miracle of the American experience, which is the individual has an inherent right under the laws, the natural laws of God, to believe in their own beliefs. And if Clay Douglas says, I want to live on my own the way I want to live it, that is his right under our Constitution.
And I took an oath to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, when I was 17 years old in 1964. And I don't believe there was an expiration date. I couldn't find an expiration date on that.
No, and that theology, if you will, or that ideology of defending the concepts of our Constitution, as you well know, are long being forgotten. Because we're now being taught that by our own president that the Constitution is an insufficient document, that it should be more of a proactive document rather than a document that protects us from government. It should be a document that imposes government, and that's a mistake of the highest order.
It's absolutely what we're fighting against, Steve. What is your answer? Now I refer to the cities as the concentration camps today. You know, in the 21st century. The cities are where they put the police state on. The cities, you can't save water from a rain barrel in Colorado. You can't start a garden in your front yard because the neighborhood association won't appreciate it. So I pointed moving out of the cities, but you could also do the same thing, the Liberty Village concept, people living together, working together, growing their own food, running their own energy, exactly like they did in New Orleans when Brad Pitt put a little money in it.
Right. But, you know, to your point, I believe that the solution to these problems are to empower the individual, to put them on what I refer to as a path to happiness and prosperity, and it comes down to building that self-sufficiency in 5 areas: financial, emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual. And if you can bring those together and you can move forward on a trajectory on those of a positive direction, then you can begin to operate as an individual without the slave status that you might have against a government that is increasingly intrusive.
All right, I'd like to talk about those. I've always told people, when anytime a communist regime takes over a country, and obviously we have a communist in as president right now, they go after 3 classes of people, in order almost. They go after the farmers first because they don't want you being able to feed yourself. They go after the intelligentsia next. That's anyone that's smart enough to know what they're doing. And third, they go after the veterans and the law enforcement that are still loyal to the old regime, and that's happening now. There is an organization called Oath Keepers. I'll be meeting with them on Friday, or Saturday, rather, up in Quartzsite, Arizona. There are organizations, but tell me about this intellectual path. Unless you want to do this in order, financial path, emotional path, physical
we can
path.
do it in any order because they're all equally important. The intellectual path was put into this because we're seeing in America today, it's been referred to as the dumbing down of America. I would put it in this light. In the mid-1800s, it was illegal to teach a slave to read. The reason for that is that they knew that a slave who could read would rise up against his master. We are seeing the same thing play out in the United States today, where our kids are graduating high school without the ability to read. Our students are not being taught how to critically think. They're not being taught the truth about the history of the nation, about the economic structure of the nation. There is virtually no financial literacy taught in this country, and I would argue that that's a conscious effort. And it's done to keep people down. And that's exactly what we're seeing. When we look at the social welfare system that really decimated the inner cities, you look at Detroit right now, half of that population is functionally illiterate. That doesn't work. It's not fair to those people, it's not fair to the community, and it's not fair to our nation. So the intellectual path is all about pushing forward to ideas that help people become more enlightened and learn how to read and process information. Look at different options in schooling. Let's take a look at magnet schools and charter schools and home schools. Let's look at these things to try individually to create a better path for our kids so that we can stop this degradation of American education and start to once again excel.
I agree with that. For the Liberty Villages, we have the Little Red Schoolhouse, which is available to every family by internet. And we also, that'll take them through kindergarten to the 12th grade, and then we've got Timothy Bible College that you can get your master's degree in.
There you go. And we're seeing now with the explosive power of the internet, the ability to do education differently than we've ever done it before. In fact, there is now a national organization of public school administrators who are using the internet to create a public school homeschool alternative. Because we're now seeing the ability for families educating their children to draw the best and the brightest of the intelligentsia, if you will, of the intellectual people from Harvard or Yale, wherever they want to get it, from Liberty University, you name it, but you can bring the best and brightest professors uniquely to you. So it's creating a whole new opportunity.
Which is kind of what I do on a daily basis, Steve.
Pardon?
I said that's kind of what I do on a daily basis. I bring people like you to the attention of the rest of the public. Just out of curiosity, Steve, I think so far I really like your 5 paths. And how many AM and FM or television stations have you been on lately?
Oh, I've been on probably 24 radio stations. I've got an upcoming interview on Fox News. But those have almost, without exception, been about just the financial path because there's so much concern by people right now of what's going on Wall Street, and folks don't understand it. So they hear about the Standard & Poor's downgrade of the U.S., they hear about Moody's downgrading Japan, and they wonder what will this do to my future. And so I've been everywhere I can trying to explain to people how that works. And it's a rare opportunity, to be very honest with you, Clay, where I get to talk in depth about all 5 paths because that's what it's about. It's not just about money.
Well, the whole concept for Liberty Villages is people working together in a close setting, a social setting, which I think we're really missing today. I mean, I lived in Miami 8 years, Steve, and I never knew my neighbors.
That, you know, I read a thing one time and it said the collapse of the American society was caused by air conditioning. Because, as you know, we no longer sit out on the front porch. We don't know our neighbors. We go into our little cocoon, we turn on the air conditioning in the idiot box, and we just vegetate in our own little environment without any exposure to the real world other than what we're told by the television set. Very, very frighteningly, eerily similar to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Yes.
Another book, by the way, I strongly recommend folks read.
Yes, I would toss in a few by Robert A. Heinlein, too.
But it is a mission that I'm on. I grew up on Wall Street. I had an investment research company that I sold to Charles Schwab, and that allowed me the financial freedom to do some things that were more important as I entered than what I think of as the second half of my life. I'll be 50 this December. It really became a mission of mine to empower individuals with the knowledge they needed to move forward productively and happily in their lives. And when you look out at what's available to people now, it's woefully lacking in real help. There's an awful lot of surface stuff that goes on. You can look, for example, in the self-help movement at all the self-help gurus. It's all very surface. Nobody gets to the core of this dependence mentality and this victim mentality that we have in our nation. And I think that's going to be part of bringing us down. We have to eliminate the victim mentality from people and get beyond that and move into an individual responsibility.
Haven't they created 50 million, as you, I believe is the number that you use, of victims? Your victims are, you know, I'm a victim right now. I'm on Social Security. Of course, I paid into that for 40 years. But I'm on Social Security right now.
Well, right now we have 80 million Americans who receive a check in one form or another from the government. We have 40 million Americans on food stamps. That is not sustainable. It will economically break the back of the next generation.
And many of these are illegal aliens. How would you deal with that? The sheriff of Cochise County, right down here on the firing line, you might say, he's asked me to help put together a motorcycle event, a run to bring people and make people aware of what's happening in his county, in Cochise County.
Well, we need to be, this goes back, and I think people that are harder, let's say harder core on the immigration issue, get bad reputations in the media as being insensitive or whatever. But let's lay out some facts. We have in this country today stated 9% unemployment. When you peel away that statistic, it's really about 17%. In the under 25 community, it's somewhere approaching 50% in the black community. All right, if we have that much unemployment, why are we then filling American jobs with people who are not legally here and paying American social benefits to people not legally here? That must be stopped, period. And this backdoor amnesty that was just done by the Obama administration, where they're now saying they're not going to deport people, they're going to effectively let them go, the fact of the matter is that is costing Americans jobs. And if there are people listening today who are out of work and can't find a job, that is one place they ought to be looking, they ought to be talking to their representatives about locking down these borders.
Steve, you should plan on coming to to Arizona on Veterans Day to speak at this Cochise County run, because Sheriff Babu is trying to make people understand that, and we couldn't do it. He asked me to put together this event, and I said, well, I can do it, but the first two people that I mentioned it to, if I refer to illegal aliens, you know, and the billions that it's costing us, trillions actually, they immediately turned off. The blinders went down. That sheriff Deaver, he's a racist.
This has nothing whatsoever to do with race. If we go back to the mid-1800s, we had the exact same issues with Irish immigration. We stopped illegal immigration then. We have to stop it now. No country that has open borders has ever survived. And we cannot survive this. You now have organizations like La Raza down in the southern United States claiming recapturing the Southwest for Mexico.
That's right.
We cannot have that. And the textbooks down in Arizona and Texas have been published as saying that we conquered Mexican territory and we need to give it back to them. And
we had the federal government. Steve, let me ask you about this, because I'm kind of leaning over here towards this financial path, because what you're talking about right now is the financial destruction of America, and they've gone after the farmers years ago, telling the farmers what they can grow, and they eliminated our billion-dollar crop. I want your opinion on this. In the 30s, the Encyclopedia Britannica had been published on hemp paper for 100 years. Suddenly it was illegal to do that.
I am not an expert in hemp, and I will tell you that I don't, but here's my position on that. If we go back to the 30s when all of this really exploded, it started after the war between the states, it exploded in the 30s. But the fact of the matter is, Will Rogers, and folks listening may not know who Will Rogers was, but he was a man of the people, and he created humor in the 30s based on a government that was beginning to be an overbearing government. And Will Rogers frequently joked about the fact the biggest fear in his life is the government ain't coming to help you.
And they did help him. He died in a plane crash with Wiley Post, didn't he?
And so when you look at agriculture in the United States, there's a lot of big corporate firms who've made a lot of big money off government subsidies. But the fact of the matter is, we need to get the government out of agriculture, just as we have most, tried to do in our whole country. Let's get them out of it. Let's let free people grow free crops. Yes, it's more volatile. I get it. Yes, we're going to have ups and downs in the economy. But what we have on the other side is government-developed bubbles that when they pop are going to be really ugly. This debt bubble that's building in the United States and Europe will make the Depression look like child's play.
Now, Obama certainly recognizes that, doesn't he? He just passed another executive order, one executive order legalizing all the illegals. Now, I've talked with a lot of ranchers in Texas, in Arizona, and to me, the basis of every civilization is a self-sufficient family farm.
Right.
I want to see us get back to that. We have 40% of in the Depression, 40% of Americans lived and worked on farms, so we got through that pretty easily. Today, it won't be that easy.
No, it won't. And what you're talking about fundamentally is bringing the power back to the people in the truest sense of the word.
The Obama's idea of greening America is to sell the top of that mountain to a foreign corporation. The foreign corporation will bring wind generators made in China into this country, put them up there, kill a few eagles, sell that power down to the power company. The power company turns around and sells it back to you. I want to cut out all the middlemen.
Clay, let me tell you directly the government's vision of the U.S. economy. Boeing Aircraft Country, the company, in terms of building its new Dreamliner aircraft, spent $2 billion to build a new plant in South Carolina. That plant was to push 10 to 20 Dreamliners off that production line each month and would have hired thousands of people. They put out the resumes or the applications, they filled those jobs, and at the 11th hour, the National Labor Relations Board under Barack Obama came in and shut the plant down. Now, when you do that and you say, we're going to shut down Boeing's plant in South Carolina because it's anti-union, that was their position. They were retaliating against the unions in Seattle, Washington by building the plant there. Now, here we are a couple weeks later when General Electric, with Jeff Immelt, the chairman, who sits on Barack Obama's Committee for Competitiveness, or whatever the heck it's called, Jeff Immelt's company just sent its aircraft engine manufacturing to China. That is the vision of this government on how American business should work.
They're setting up Chinese trade areas right here in this country. I believe Wyoming, they got one they've already set up.
And they're doing it because China has loaned us $1 trillion and we need their money. And that if you go back to the early 1900s, after World War I, the British Empire was known as the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Correct.
That came to an end because the United States came out of World War I as the world's creditor nation. We bought the rights to sit atop the mountain. Well, now here we are 100 years later, and China has bought the right to sit atop the mountain, and they're dismantling the American experience day by day by day. And this move by Boeing is a specific example of that.
Well, this was happening. This has happened under every president, Steve. And I've been involved in presidential candidates, and I can tell you, you don't have any choice in who you vote for president in reality. Because everybody that the client the man that I supported was named Charles Collins, and he was trying to point out to the Republican Party we could buy back the bank, the Federal Reserve, wipe out a $6 trillion, which is 12 trillion or 15 trillion now debt, and they wouldn't show him on television. They wouldn't allow him to go on television.
No, it becomes even with what I would think of as a mainstream candidate, Ron Paul, who can't get media time.
That's right. And Ron Paul was a subscriber of mine in the Free American magazine for years.
Exactly. And so we see that kind of media control, and that's another goes back to the 5 paths. Individuals have to learn to go beyond that. They have to be their own people, and they have to empower themselves so they can move forward on a path that they control.
Well, that's it. You're right. And I wrote a book about this 40 years ago. It's going to come out about the rights of an individual being the most important thing. That's what our Bill of Rights is about, folks. It ain't about the Constitution is written to put change on the government. The Bill of Rights says you got a right to do this. You've got the right to do this. You got the right to bear arms. You got the right to feed your families. And by the way, the 9th plank on the Communist Manifesto is corporate farms. Can you say Archer, Daniels, Midland, and Monsanto?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Big government and big business in bed together is a dangerous thing.
Now, Obama has just issued this new executive order. It's listed and linked up on my website. He says there's tremendous economical opportunity in rural land, in rural areas.
They've created the whole rural council, which I've looked at that. That's a scary thing. This is a committee, for the folks listening, where every department of the federal government is involved in it.
Yes.
I mean, why would you have the Federal Communications, organization involved in that? Why do you have Homeland Defense involved in rural America?
Well, you may need those troops to come in and put that meter on your well.
Well, you know what? And under the conditions of the EPA, they probably will, because they'll say we're doing water management. So now, Mr. Farmer, you can't use your water without our permission. And now that farmer will do what he's told.
They've already done that in Central Valley in California, Steve.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the Veterans Day event. It would be my great pleasure to come down there and join you on that. So please make sure we get information back and forth on that.
I will do that. Now let me ask you this. And everybody rises to their own level of incompetence. And I may have...
I rose past mine a long time ago.
where am I here? Okay. Mine may be in the financial path. At one time here, 7 years ago, I had 4 books out. I had 4 films out. I had 3 books ready to print. I had 2 magazines, and I had an accident. Except I don't think it was an accident. And they destroyed me financially. They kept me drugged for 3 months to run up a $750,000 hospital bill for 3 broken ribs and a motorcycle accident. And after that, I've had people call me up, Clay, I want to help you get started again. Well, I appreciate it, man, but it's expensive. Hey, I got $1.5 million in one account. Money's not an issue. People need to know about the illegals. They need to know about the Free American. I want to help you get it started again. Well, buy me breakfast. I'll be down in the morning. U.S. Customs shot him that morning coming out of Safeway with my breakfast. And that was on 60 Minutes. Morris Dees went in and sued Casey Nettercott, took his 70-acre ranch, gave it to the 2 illegals he was accused of pistol whipping in Texas years ago. And that was on 60 Minutes. They just didn't tell you that they shot him the month before buying Clay Douglas breakfast. And Sheriff Larry Deaver was a sheriff then at that time, and he'll be telling that whole story that I've told in my books, Mystery Babylon, New World Order Unveiled. He'll be telling that story at this event that I want you to speak at.